we say, okay, what do people want? And we know though the majority of the community want a rail-based activation of this corridor to connect towns and villages, there are a lot who also want that, I guess, that more broader recreational outcome, to be able to walk, to be able to ride, to become a tourist attraction for those who also want to walk and ride. And so let's start with that position. Can we cater for both needs and wants? And I think through our, I guess, strategic consultant reports that have come to us, it suggests that not only can we, but it actually is the most feasible economically and the most financially viable option is to do both. A rail trail or a bike path on its own doesn't generate any revenue for the space. It may in a broader economic term, but it costs to maintain and it's a free service. So therefore, it's a financial drain on whoever is managing that corridor. The shuttle service can provide that economic stimulus to help fund the bike path and do so much more on top of that as well. So I guess starting from a position of can we bring everyone along for the ride, it's been now shown that that is the most desirable and preferable way to go forward. So I guess it's one of those things from a council point of view or from a Byron community point of view, is this could be the great dividend we've been yearning for and have been deserving of from the visitor economy over the last 30, 40, 50 years. Finally, the fact that visitors are here could unlock an amazing benefit for us. And so if we can create a service, perhaps hold our tongues and talk less on transport and more on tourism, they will fund it. They will subsidise it. It is their use which makes it economically feasible, knowing that you and I and members of our community will be able to buy perhaps a few $100 a year pass, and we get our transport option, a benefit as well. So it's a matter of, I guess, trying to put absolute ideology to the side to make sure we get the outcome, which is what we need. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shape it as a great tourism project that we locals can benefit from. Well, one of the things that came out as regarding the condition is that it's nowhere near as bad as what was first prophesied, I guess, by those who were very keen for it to be removed as far as a track network. We do know, obviously you need to drill down far deeper to really look, really thoroughly at things like the bridge conditions. But certainly from a visual assessment by experts, they were a bit blown away by the quality of the infrastructure. The ballasts, so all the levelled ground underneath the tracks are all in pretty good nick. A lot of the tracks themselves are in pretty good nick. A lot of work had actually been done only a few years before the track was closed. So rather than being faced, incredibly rusted, disintegrating, aged infrastructure, most of it was quite efficient and usable. Obviously some of the sleepers would need to be replaced, but even that was shown that could just be done in a pretty reasonable periodic time frame, as you would normally do. They would suggest perhaps even one out of every 4 or 5 perhaps might start being replaced, and then you might have a 5, 10, 20-year program to slowly maintain the rest. But the bridges they found were generally pretty good. As I said, the actual track themselves, the alignments, the conditions underneath it and around it were all pretty good. A lot of the stormwater infrastructure, which of course, if collapsing can have an impact onto that, were pretty good. So what it basically showed is it's nowhere near as bad as we think. And in fact was pleasantly surprised and surprising about just how good the quality is. It's obviously not something that we will just put a shuttle service on tomorrow. It would require many millions of dollars, many tens of millions of dollars perhaps for the entire length. But what it suggests is the vast bulk of it, which is here in situ, could remain in situ and just be periodically and routinely replaced as needed. So again, there's going to be some areas which will be more expensive than others. But what we do know, again, even things like, trees growing in and around, those things in themselves aren't massively expensive. It's not, you know, I guess if we think even reasonably, it's not massively expensive to remove a tree. It's not massively expensive to actually just ensure the root systems are covered so they can't, you know, affect the ballast. So those sorts of things, they may look like they're massive impediments, but they're actually, when we're talking about the tens of millions of dollars of redevelopment to provide hundreds of millions of dollars of economic dividend, those things are pretty small, you know, small costs compared to the overall benefit. The only place in New South Wales outside a metro area where there is a traffic jam on the Pacific Highway every morning is the off-ramp to go to Byron. Now, how many of them are coming from the north? How many of them are coming from Mullum to go to work that instead could park here and jump on a shuttle, and 15 minutes later they're in the industrial estate and then they're in the Byron CBD? I mean, who wouldn't take up that opportunity if given that opportunity? So we know from a traffic point of view, the hundreds of thousands of cars a year that could be diverted off the road and people could be diverted onto a shuttle to get to the farmers markets, to get to the festivals, to get to Splendour, which is 80 metres from Yelgan train station, to get to Blues Fest, which is a few hundred metres from the Niagara train station, to be able to get to work, to be able to get to school. All of these different benefits and usages would result in one significant thing when it comes to our road network: pressure off, cars off, traffic off, emissions down, and a bit more sanity when it comes to how we get around and use our roads. What we want is a state government to not commit necessarily to anything. Heaven forbid they would actually support something like this, but at least provide a space for the private sector, the community, councils, other stakeholders to put some proposals forward. We all know we've been operating in this vacuum of desperation because we're constantly feeling we need to react quickly, because we're hearing that this legislation is going to change, that this new political decision is going to derail what we're trying to do. And it's really frustrating and it's really ineffective when we're trying to present something that's truly visionary but also extremely reasonable. So we know that due to a fair bit of effort and work over the last couple of years, that there is now, and also spending $250,000 of local ratepayers' money, which arguably should have been spent by a state government who actually owns the rail. We did it ourselves, and it clearly showed that these two uses of the corridor can exist and are financially available. And now we're starting to at least get state government sympathies to that understanding. And regardless of the party, we're starting to get some support to at least acknowledge that Byron, within the rail corridor, is a different beast to other areas. One, we don't need more tourists. And our tourism sector want our visitors to disperse out of Byron Bay. We want them to stay longer, spend more, and get around the region. And so the best way to do that is provide them an experience to do that. I mean, the examples are endless. The uses are endless. And that's why it makes just absolute reasonable and common sense to say, let's at least give that idea a chance. Let's at least cost it. Let's at least find out who may be willing to put money in to make that happen. To stop before we know those answers is an abrogation of responsibility for our kids and our grandkids.